Shalom. Thanks for joining me today. This is a by request um, story. I was talking to a sister in the faith, and we got to talking about death and burial. And so when I talked to her and shared with her my experience with my mom and with my husband about immediate burial, she said, well, people ought to know about that. So this is where this came from. Now, I'm originally from Detroit, and there, people have the frame of mind when it comes to funerals that some people, okay, they want to give them a good send off. Okay, now people can do whatever they want to do because it ain't my money that they're spending, and they do, and people do what they want to do. But I reflected as I got grown. I didn't know whether or not it didn't make sense to me to put a lot of money in the ground when the people living could really use the money. For instance, I have a second cousin, and then she was very well beloved by her family, friends. She was choir director at a couple of churches. And when she passed, the funeral was in a huge church, and it was like on standing room only. Okay. Her husband had gotten a casket for her, and I went to the viewing one evening, and the casket was like a pale pink or something like that, and had her name engraved on the side. And I said, wow. And I know that they weren't in the financial riches or anything, that because they had like 6 or 7 children and grandchildren, and a lot of times the children depended upon them for some support also. So I said, well, wow. I said, that's a lot of money to spend. Then one of Floyd's aunts passed, and they spent, in excess of $10,000 or something on the funeral. And that was money that I know that family could have used. Okay. So I'm just thinking about that. All right. So let's fast forward up to 2014. Before I do that, I want to mention the backdrop. We have moved, and we're probably 75% into this house. I still got a pod sitting out there in the front that has to be unloaded. But I haven't figured out where the backdrop is going to be for Shar's stories. But this is pretty good. So we'll see. If you're wondering about where happened to the orange wall, I used to like that orange wall in our other house. And we were in rural country before. Now we're in a rural city. This is still rural, but it's very nice. All right. So, I said, fast forward to 2014. My mom went in a nursing home. And so part of the nursing home procedures is that when you're there, you have to let them know what funeral home to get in contact with if the person should die while they're there. So I did. I got in touch, and not only get in touch with them, but you got to pay it. Okay, and so I don't know what people do about elaborate ones, but anyway, so I said, well, I really don't know a a funeral home to get in contact with, and so they told me about Mr. Crawford over. It was in their county in Lancaster, South Carolina. So I talked with him, and he was quite friendly. And so he mentioned something, and he said immediate burial they have done before. So I said, well, explain to me what that is. So if you get the person in the ground within 3 days in South Carolina, now I don't know if this is everywhere, you don't have to embalm them. You just disinfect the body. And what they would do is they would put it in a heavy duty burial plastic bag, and then put it in a cardboard casket. And he just happened to have had an extra cardboard casket there that he gave to me for free. Okay. And then they had a cemetery that they used over in Lancaster, and the plots over there was like only $400 and some dollars. So by the time he added all that up, it was like only $1,725. So I said, that sounded good. And it sounded really good to my mom too, because she wanted to leave money to me and my sister. And so it worked out well. So what within a short time, I paid it off. But don't you know, the day after I paid it off, my mama passed. So I called him. I said, Mr. Carper, I really didn't think I would be calling you this soon. He said, yeah, Miss Campbell, I didn't think you would either. So I told him, I said, well, what we're going to do, I said that we'll meet you at the cemetery, and there will not be a service because I didn't want a service because they were Christian, and I know they're getting ready to pray people up to heaven. And I wasn't going to have a pastor to come out there because Mama didn't have a pastor other than at times she would watch Arthur Bailey, okay, and that was my pastor. So, and we were messianic. So, and we believe that once you die, your body goes in the grave, and that's where you stay until the first or the second resurrection, okay. So, that day when we found out that she had passed, Winston and Zoe were at school, and so when Zoe came home, we told her because the funeral was going to be like at I think she passed 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were going to bury not the funeral, but we were going to bury her that afternoon. So we told Zoe, and so Winston had to go football practice, and so I said, well, let him go to football practice, and I asked the school to have him contact me right afterwards. So we decided we would meet up at Kentucky Fried Chicken, which was around the corner from the cemetery. I'm going to say this. Our family is a little bit off the normal beat, okay? So, and if you listen to any of these stories, you know, okay, you just know, all right? So now we sort of have a tradition. So I don't know if 2 times makes a tradition, but my mama and when Floyd died, we met at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we had the chicken, and then we went on over to the cemetery, okay? So the 4 of us are in the car, and then I guess we had 2 cars because Winston had to meet us over there. And so we decided we just get the takeout and we go to the cemetery. And we would sit there and we would wait for them to come because we would get there early. So while we were sitting there eating chicken, 2 big black limousines pull up. Now I had told this man I ain't want a service. So when Floyd saw him pull up, he said, Sharon, he said, if you don't jump out and go over there, we ain't gonna be able to stop this parade. Okay, so I got out. Now, our family was just dressed in regular street clothes, okay? I had on some pedal pushers and a top, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know what pedal pushers are, back in the day, back in the 50s, those were the kind of pants that you wore when you were riding a bicycle because it had a little, they cut off right below your knee and had a little dart on the side of it so that you could easily push the pedals. Bicycle. Now, that's my interpretation where the word came from, okay? So I get out, and so I walk over just to smile because I knew I had talked to this man now, okay? So I said, aren't you all a bit overdressed? And so they all kind of laughed, and so I told them, I said, this is what's going to happen. I said that you all are going to take my mama out of the limousine and put her right here, and then I'm going to say a few words of prayer to thank Father for, allowing me to have my mother and the memories that we had. And then we're going to lower her in the grave, and then that's it. So they all said, okay. Now, somebody later said to me, Sharon, when they show up like that, they expect them to be paid. So this was like after the fact. 'Cause I ain't paid them nothing. I had already paid what for the funeral, and he hadn't said it was anything else. Okay, so that's what we did for my mom. Okay, so Floyd and I had discussed that we would do the same thing for both of us should we not should we pass or whichever one passed first, the other one would do the same thing. So Floyd, this was like, now fast forward now to 2022, okay? And Floyd decided, and his health had been going down, and he was like in and out of the hospital almost like every other month or so. And I think in June, he went in the hospital. In July, he was back in the hospital. And he told me, he said, Sharon, I'm not coming in the hospital anymore. And so what the doctors were trying to get him to do was to go into hospice, okay? and because his kidneys were also failing, as in addition to dealing with um, congestive heart failure. And so we had known over several years that his health was failing, and he would get better, and then he would get worse. But Floyd was the kind of person that he was going to really kind of live his life the way he wanted to, and I had to come to just accept that, just love him as my husband, and just understand he's grown, and he was going to make his decisions, and what nothing I could do to change him making other decisions that I thought was better for him, and so just leave it be. And so he decided he was going to go into hospice. He went in hospice. When I say into hospice, he was going to do a hospice at home. So I was his main caregiver, although I had hospice nurses coming in probably every other day. His insurance had nurses coming in once or twice a week. And so I had plenty of support. So, and then he passed near the end of August. So it was like a month and a half. He and I got to have a lot of conversation and talking about just really good memories and things, and forgiving each other, and asked him to forgive me for nagging him, through the years. And he did. And I told him I had forgiven him for not listening to me and doing what I said, because I thought that he'd be able to live longer. And, he thanked me for really helping him to be able to live as long as he did. So, we were, we were good at it. And he asked, so does dying hurt? So I said, no, I think you just go to sleep unless you get hit by a Mack truck. It ain't gonna hurt, because he wasn't in pain. See, that was the thing about it. He wasn't in pain, so a lot of times pain will kick you into doing something, making a lifestyle change. But Floyd wasn't in any pain, okay, other than the fact that he was losing energy, okay. So we had decided that we were going to do the same thing with Mr. Crawford. Floyd had a great sense of humor all the way to the end. I remember one afternoon he was taking a nap, and I was in there when he woke up. And he woke up, he said, "Wow," he said, "I'm still here." And we both kind of chuckled, and laughed, because I had been knowing Floyd since I was like 5, okay? So anyway, Mr. Crawford, he finally got it right this time. When he passed, he came and picked him up. Oh, it was like Floyd died something like 3 or something in the morning, and then he came and picked him up before 5 o'clock, because the hospice nurse had to come and take care of things that they had to do, and then the funeral people came and picked him up, and then he was put in the ground around 3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon, and the cost for him, I think it was like $2,300 and some change, may have been $2,400 and some change, but he was buried not too far from my mom in the cemetery. And what I decided to do, now he was a veteran, and the VA will give you a free headstone if you all don't know that. And I decided, I'm going to put something, because you can get, I think, 5 lines worth of something on there, So I decided I'm going to put on there something that will be a continual testimony about Floyd's faith, and a testimony to maybe people will look at it and see, what is that? Why is that on there? And maybe it would plant a seed, and hopefully they would come to Father also. So what I put on there, the last few lines, was follower of Yeshua Messiah and Jehovah's law. So if Floyd and I hadn't talked about that ahead of time, because we really hadn't thought about that, but I'm sure that he had known about it, he would have been pleased about it. Not that he's looking down from up in heaven and pleased by what I put on him. So you don't know nothing about that. All right. So the whole point of this is, and let me just say something else. Some of these things have to be thought about ahead of time, because when you get in the moment and somebody dies, a lot of times your emotions take over, and in funeral homes and things like that, they have their set plans or whatever, and they're in business to make money. Okay, so they're not trying to get you to do cost savings per se. And so you have to do that at a time when you're not emotionally distraught dealing with a death. What Floyd and Zoe and I, because she was the only one left at home at the time, did, we had a roundtable discussion. And what we did is we talked about what we would do if any of us died. And we talked about what we would do, what Floyd and I would do if Zoe died, what Zoe and I would do if Floyd died, what Zoe and Floyd would do if I died. So we had some idea of the kinds of things that we would do. And so that's so helpful that you don't wait until you get to the situation. Like I said, death is a part of life. And so we need to discuss those things, just as we need to plan for those things so that it ain't nothing wrong with the go-to funds, all right? But if you have nothing because you haven't planned, then that's kind of shame on you. Because Proverbs does say, a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. Okay, so the first part of that you want to leave an inheritance, something that you don't want to put all the money in the ground, and then you want to make plans ahead of time. And I hope that you all can receive this message, because one thing Arthur said, that people can receive your message or your gospel if they see it working in your life. And I've had 2 examples to show you about, and that's the way that we're going to do it. And the good send-off is that the person's in the ground, and any money that was left, the living people will have it. Shalom, shalom. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like and share and subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much.